Oh, my dear. They circled you like vultures on a carcass not yet cold, whispered death like it was a lullaby, and expected you to quietly suffocate beneath the weight of their cursed prophecies. They didn't raise swords, they raised their tongues, forked, poisonous, wrapped in fake concern and soaked in the venom of subtle sabotage. And while they spoke of your end with the calm certainty of executioners, you listened, not with fear, but with patience. You didn't fall. No, you sank, strategically, into silence so profound it scared even the demons they sent to finish the job. Because they forgot something fundamental. Breath doesn't die when death is spoken. It waits, and then it roars. They declared you a ghost before your body ever tasted stillness. They celebrated your collapse as if your soul had signed off on it. Every sigh you exhaled became their confirmation that you were fading. But what they couldn't see, what their poisoned minds couldn't comprehend, was that you weren't gasping for life. You were inhaling purpose. You were becoming the storm in reverse, collecting chaos, sucking in every insult, every betrayal, every so-called eulogy that was nothing more than a premature obituary written by cowards who mistook your pause for permission. They didn't bury you. They planted something they couldn't kill. And now the roots are cracking their foundations. They tried to kill your name before you'd even discovered its power. They passed it around like a dirty secret, twisting it into warnings, jokes, cautionary tales. They didn't just want you erased. They wanted you humiliated, forgotten, smeared into oblivion so thoroughly that even your shadow wouldn't dare to stretch. But what they failed to grasp is that every time they spoke your name in hatred, they were unknowingly building your mythology. Because when the devils in suits gather around to mock someone who hasn't died yet, it isn't mockery, it's prophecy in reverse. Their ridicule was a hymn. Their laughter, the chorus of their own undoing. They fed your legend while trying to choke your legacy. Poetic, isn't it? You became their favorite myth to crucify. And still, you didn't flinch. They painted your silence as surrender. They dressed up your retreat as retreat. But you were never running. You were rearming. While they played chess with plastic pieces, you were melting steel into weapons forged by betrayal and aimed with precision. Let them call it vengeance. Let them label it madness. Because they'll never understand that the man who walks out of his own grave doesn't seek justice. He becomes it. You didn't survive. You evolved. You outlived the narrative they rehearsed. And when your breath returned, it wasn't a gasp. It was a command. They wrote your epitaph in ink made of mockery. Too soft. Too broken. Too emotional. They wanted you to internalize those scripts, rehearse them until your throat bled their dialogues. But you chose to forget their lines. You rewrote the play. And now their voices tremble when they hear yours. Because something terrifying happens when the condemned learns how to speak again, not to beg, but to declare. You speak now not with words, but with aftermaths. You don't argue, you echo. Every move you make now is louder than the sermons they preached over your supposed demise. You're not back. You never left. You were simply out of frame, preparing to re-enter, like a blade slips into a ribcage. They fear breath now. How ironic. The same breath they mocked as weak, unstable, worthless, now it carries weight. Gravitas. Threat. It lingers in rooms longer than your presence. It enters before you do. And it chills their spines before your eyes even meet theirs. You became the ghost they tried to summon, but not the obedient kind. You returned not in chains, but with a ledger, and they're in it. Every smirk, every backhanded compliment, every moment they thought you were too broken to retaliate. It's all inked in. The reckoning isn't a storm, it's a whisper. Your whisper, and it's enough to unmake them. They say breath is life, but they forgot that life forged in darkness breathes differently. Yours doesn't inflate lungs, it ignites reckoning. It enters their dreams not as comfort, but as consequence. They thought they'd be free once you fell. They assumed silence meant surrender. But your silence was study. It was incubation. It was a symphony tuning in the dark before the first note breaks the sky. And now that note has come. You, alive, undeniable, unforgiving. You became what they feared you'd never have the spine to be, untouchable and aware. There's no resurrection without a crucifixion. You let them hang you on the cross of public opinion, let them laugh while you bled dignity, let them drink wine made from your tears, and call it victory. But resurrection isn't just about rising, it's about remembering. And you remember everything. You remember who applauded your failure, who stood quiet when you screamed, who gave up on you before you even knew you were worth fighting for. And now that your eyes have reopened in this world that thought it was rid of you, oh, the reckoning won't be theatrical. It'll be surgical, precise, poetic, the kind of justice that doesn't make noise, but leaves scars. You were never meant to be their version of survival. You were meant to redefine it. Survival isn't breathing, it's converting breath into consequence. It's turning every "you'll never make it" into a stepping stone, every "you're not enough" into ammunition. They wanted you to die quietly. You chose to live loudly, but not with words, with proof, with presence, with an aura so dense it makes their lungs beg for relief. You don't need revenge in flames. You bring slow suffocation, the type of poetic justice that makes them wish you'd burn their houses instead of haunting their minds. And now, you walk through the very ruins they built for you to collapse in, not as a victim, but as the only survivor with memory intact. They see it in your eyes, that strange, unfamiliar gleam, not rage, not pain, something worse, composure, the kind that says, "I heard you speak death, and I used it to learn how to kill everything that made me doubt myself." You don't roar anymore, you whisper, because you know now your voice was never meant to be loud. It was meant to be heard in silence. And as they stand at the edge of their crumbling thrones, hearing that silence swell into pressure, they realize something. This isn't your return. This is your arrival. They assumed your return would be noisy, all flash and fury, a theatrical meltdown in flames. But no, you walked back in like silence wearing boots. No fireworks, just consequences. Your existence became the uncomfortable truth they can't digest, the unspeakable proof that their curses failed to infect the marrow. You didn't come back screaming, you came back aware of everything, of how they maneuvered in your absence, of how they rehearsed grief like a performance they couldn't wait to stage. They crafted false sympathy with trembling hands, not from sorrow, but from fear that your name might still echo. And now that you're here, the echo has become an earthquake. They called you finished because they couldn't comprehend a revival without their permission. You slipped through the cracks they thought would devour you, and now those same cracks stretch across their world, like fractures in a mirror that no longer reflects their version of the story. You weren't reborn, you emerged from beneath the weight of their labels, from behind the curtain of their expectations, no longer bound by the roles they forced on you, like a bad script handed to a better actor. You tossed the script into the fire and rewrote the ending. And now, they're trapped inside a story that no longer favors them. Your presence is no longer a continuation, it's a confrontation. Every step you take now presses against their comfort like glass beneath bare feet. You've become the pause between their lies and their unraveling. The very breath they tried to extinguish now fogs the glass between them and their illusions. They can't look at you without choking on their own misjudgments. You became the contradiction to their certainty, a walking scar with eyes that no longer weep but weigh. You see through their intentions now, not because you want to, but because you have to. And what you see disgusts you. This isn't rage anymore. It's calculation. It's patience wearing armor. The kind of patience that lets snakes reveal themselves without lifting a single finger. You realized something they never wanted you to. Sometimes the most devastating move is to do nothing and let the guilt rot them from the inside out. You don't need to strike. You just need to exist. Every breath you draw is a reminder that they misread the blueprint, that they gambled on your breakdown and bet against the wrong monster. Now they sit in their well-polished thrones, haunted not by what you said, but by what you survived. You stopped chasing explanations. There's no dignity in begging wolves to understand why you didn't bleed out on command. They never wanted the truth. They wanted you desperate, powerless, predictable. But now, you are none of those things. You are not the echo of your past. You are the thunder that follows the silence. You don't rise to meet them. You wait, because you've learned that real fear doesn't arrive with a bang. It tiptoes in the quiet, wearing your name like an omen. The world they built without you was weak. A house of cards, balanced on the assumption you'd never return to test the wind. But you didn't knock. You exhaled, and the whole thing trembled. They knew how to operate in your absence, not in your presence. And now, as you glide through the space they thought you'd never occupy again, you notice it, the shift. Their voices drop, their smiles falter, their eyes search for exits, because deep down they understand. When someone survives the grave they were spoken into, they're not the same anymore. They remember differently. They choose differently. They punish differently. You've become fluent in a language they never cared to learn, the dialect of quiet vengeance. No raised voice, no overt threats, just presence that stings, just existence that shatters illusions. They can't escape you because you're not chasing them. You haunt in plain sight, a breathing contradiction to the narrative they worshipped. They dressed your absence in relief. But now, they're overdressed in fear, sweating behind masks they stitched together from old excuses. You don't have to expose them. They're undressing themselves, trying to justify what they did when they thought no one was watching. Your silence used to be your prison. Now it's your weapon. The space you once filled with explanations, apologies, overcompensation, now it's empty. And that emptiness terrifies them. Because in that void, they hear the ticking, not of a bomb, but of accountability, crawling toward them on hands made of memory. And you? You simply wait. Not because you're indecisive, but because you're finally dangerous. Not wild, not reactive, just devastatingly composed. And they have no defense for that. They prepared for rage, not stillness with a purpose. They can't joke about you anymore. The punchline doesn't land, because now, when your name leaves their mouths, it doesn't produce laughter. It produces discomfort. Your transformation dismantled their entire comedy. You became a tragedy they can't parody, a horror they can't dismiss. You no longer need to remind them of what they did. They wake up remembering, and you wake up deciding. Not who to forgive, but who deserves your silence longer. Who deserves to sweat a little more in the presence of the person they tried to erase. You don't have to yell that you've changed. They feel it. In your calm, in your refusal to argue, in the way you stare through them, as if weighing their value rather than pleading for their validation. They feel it in how you no longer participate in their dysfunction, in how you stopped playing roles you outgrew, in how you don't retaliate, you replace. Peace doesn't mean they won. It means they've become irrelevant. You didn't rebuild for their applause. You rebuilt to make sure they'd never matter again. You stopped bleeding on command, stopped shrinking to keep the fragile comfortable. You realized their perception of you was never your reflection, just a shadow cast by their own insecurities. And now, they look up and see someone unfamiliar, someone sculpted from all the silence they mistook for surrender, someone armored in every scar they laughed at. You've become untouchable, not because you're invincible, but because you're aware. And awareness is lethal. They wanted you to forget. That was the plan. Overwhelm you, gaslight you, isolate you, until even you questioned whether the wound was real. But you didn't forget. You cataloged, you studied, you watched, and now you carry it all, not as burden, but as blueprint. You don't seek to return to who you were. That person had to die for this version to emerge. And this version? It doesn't beg. It doesn't explain. It names things. With precision. With finality. With no room left for denial. And what terrifies them the most isn't that you survived. It's that you're thriving without them. That you didn't just rise. You ascended. That their absence was never the tragedy. It was the detox. You cut the poison out and found clarity. And now, their invitations go unanswered. Their access revoked. Not out of spite, but evolution. You're not punishing them. You're just not pretending anymore. And that, to them, is punishment enough. They lit a fire hoping it would consume you. Instead, it forged something they can't unsee. You became the proof that resilience isn't pretty. It's brutal. It's built in nights where sleep felt like betrayal, in mornings where breathing felt like war. And now, with every inhale, you remind the world, you didn't just survive what they did. You redefined survival. And that breath they tried to kill, it became a sermon, a sentence, a sword, a storm, and you're just getting started. This isn't a comeback. Comebacks imply that you left the game, licked your wounds, and asked for a second chance. No, this is an infiltration. You didn't return. You reappeared in the very spaces they poisoned, breathing life into air they left to rot. You're not here to relive old stories. You're here to rewrite the genre. No apologies, no mercy, just the calm, calculated aftermath of someone who knows that survival isn't enough. Dominion is the goal now. They wanted you buried, not because you were weak, but because your presence reminded them of their own fraudulence. You saw too much. You felt too deeply. You refused to numb yourself into compliance like the rest of them. And for that, they chose exile. They prayed your isolation would fracture you into silence, into irrelevance. But instead, it turned you into something they can't negotiate with, something they can't delay, disarm, or dismantle. You didn't just endure, you mutated. Pressure didn't break you. It evolved you into something unclassifiable. They can't call you victim. They can't call you villain. They can't even call you human in the way they used to understand. You became a force, not because you chased power, but because you outgrew obedience. Now their systems can't hold you. Their names don't define you. Their whispers no longer echo. They vanish in your shadow. You carry a silence now that feels like judgment, a stillness that hovers over rooms like a verdict waiting to be read aloud. People feel it. Before you speak, they fidget. Before you move, they adjust. That's what happens when someone walks in wearing the very pain meant to end them, not as shackles, but as armor. You are not who they remember. You are not even who you remember. You've crossed that final line, the one between healing and hungry. Your breath has become a command. It no longer just keeps you alive, it alters the climate. You speak and oxygen bends. Conversations shift. Dynamics flip. Now, when you walk in, they don't just notice, they calculate. Because your presence demands a reconfiguration. You are the unscheduled audit of their deception. You're not proving a point anymore. You are the point. A walking contradiction to every death sentence they spoke over your life. There's blood on their hands, and you didn't put it there. That's the part they can't handle. Because guilt is only bearable when it's distant. But now you stand in front of them, thriving, breathing, untouched by the decay they planted, and it unravels them. Their fear isn't just of you, it's of what you represent. A world where they are no longer gods, no longer gatekeepers. Your very existence is evidence that their curses are counterfeit. You don't even need revenge anymore. That's the irony. You transcended it. Because when you become the fire, you don't chase ashes. You let the wind carry them to the corners they used to mock you from. Let them build altars to their own regret. You're not interested in retribution. You're too busy building empires from the rubble they left behind. Not out of spite, out of duty. Out of the sacred responsibility of someone who knows what it's like to be erased. They don't know how to approach you now. Do they apologize? Pretend it never happened? Or retreat and hope the silence saves them? None of it works. Because your memory isn't emotional anymore. It's strategic. You don't carry pain like a wound. You wear it like a map. A blueprint that reminds you of every dead end, every betrayal disguised as kindness, every smile that was really a loaded weapon. And now, you walk that map like a battlefield you've already won. You became your own resurrection. No savior, no rescue, just grit. Just endless nights of holding yourself upright when the world expected you to collapse. And now, when people say your name, they speak it carefully, like a spell, like a secret. Because they know you're listening. They thought you'd come back begging for a seat at their table. But you burned the blueprints for that table and built your own, one where they're not invited, one where the only entry fee is truth, loyalty, and self-awareness. all things they traded for convenience. You didn't just heal, you set a new standard. And now, their mediocrity shrinks in your presence. You don't argue anymore. You embody proof. No need for debates, no lectures. Just the raw, uncomfortable reality that you made it, without their help, without their approval, without their understanding. And now, they can't look at you without seeing everything they failed to destroy. You are their unsolvable equation, the question mark that haunts their certainty. They used to say your voice didn't matter, that your dreams were unrealistic, that your fire was dangerous. And now that same fire lights up corners they can't hide in. That same voice speaks in frequencies their lies can't survive. And those dreams? They're now realities that walk beside you, armored and vengeful, reshaping everything they tried to keep untouched. You didn't just outlive them, you outclassed them. They invested in your downfall like it was a sure stock. But you went public. You bloomed in broad daylight. And now, the same mouths that mocked you study you. They quote you. They imitate the very essence they once dismissed. Because deep down, they crave that kind of liberation. But they fear the crucifixion it takes to earn it. You, however, you bled, you broke, you burned, and you rose. Not just taller, but wider. Your reach now spans everything they feared you'd never touch. They say time heals all wounds, but they never tell you what happens when time also sharpens your vision. You don't just see faces now, you see intentions. You don't just hear words, you weigh them. Every smile gets filtered. Every promise gets tested. Not because you're paranoid, because you're precise. Because when you've been dismantled by betrayal, precision becomes second nature. And now, your boundaries are not fences, they're fortresses. You've stopped announcing your moves, stopped forecasting your victories. You understood that power is most potent when it's unspoken. So you let the results speak. You let your glow tell the story. And in that silence, they hear everything. Every missed chance, every burned bridge, every door they slammed, thinking you'd never knock again. And the best part? You don't knock anymore. You build elsewhere. This final version of you isn't a chapter, it's the author. You write the narrative now. You dictate tone, theme, consequence. You are no longer character or plot device. You are the very ink that stains the page. And your story? It's not about revenge. It's about becoming so undeniable that history itself has to pause and adjust its memory to include your name, not as a footnote, but as a force. So let them talk. Let them whisper. Let them pretend they never tried to bury you. Let them sing songs of revisionist tales where they were always supportive. You won't correct them. You don't need to, because your existence in its current form is the loudest correction of all. They spoke death over you. They wrote elegies, sent condolences, performed eulogies in circles you were exiled from. But now you breathe. And every breath is a hymn, a war chant, a new language, one that only the risen understand, one that only the architects of their own survival can speak fluently. You don't need closure. You are the closing line, the final verse, the last shot in the final scene. And the credits roll, with your name carved in gold while theirs flicker and fade. And in the end, as the dust settles, as the murmurs fall into hush, as the world turns to look again, you will not smile, you will not wave, you will not speak, you will exhale, and that breath will say everything.